conventional war. The classic. Conventional war is what you see in every war movie ever. Two sides, big armies, and lots of explosions. Think of World War I, World War II, or any war where people actually line up and start shooting at each other like it's a historical reenactment gone horribly wrong. These wars are fought using everything from infantry and tanks to airstrikes and warships, and usually the winner is whoever has the biggest budget and the fewest strategic mistakes. These days, however, conventional wars are kind of going out of style, probably because blowing up entire cities is generally frowned upon. Guerrilla warfare. Now, let's talk about guerrilla warfare, the art of fighting like a ninja, but with more explosives. This is the go-to strategy for underdogs fighting against a much stronger enemy. Instead of lining up like it's a medieval duel, guerrilla fighters hide in forests, mountains, or even city streets, attack when no one's expecting it, and then disappear faster than your paycheck after payday. This is how the Viet Cong frustrated the US and Vietnam, how resistance movements fought in World War II, how rebels keep major armies busy for decades. It's like playing tag if tag involved landmines and ambushes. Civil War. Yes, Civil War, also known as family drama, but with cannons. Instead of fighting an external enemy, a country decides to fight itself, usually over power, politics, or just a massive disagreement on how things should be run. The American Civil War was literally about whether the US should be one country or two, and other examples like the Spanish Civil War and the Russian Revolution show how messy these conflicts can get. These wars are often brutal because, well, you can't exactly move to another country if your own country is the battlefield. Proxy war. This is when two big countries really hate each other but don't want to throw hands directly, so they pay other people to fight for them instead. Think of it like two rich guys arguing over whose sports team is better, but instead of debating, they fund entire wars in other countries. The Cold War was full of these. The US and USSR never actually fought each other, but they sure loved arming and funding different sides in Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan. Basically, proxy wars are like war's version of outsourcing. Why fight yourself when you can get someone else to do it for you? Total war. Total war is when a country says, you know what? Everything and everyone is part of this fight now. Factories making bombs, farmers growing food for soldiers, civilians ducking for cover because suddenly they're targets too. The best example, World War II, where entire nations threw everything into the war effort. People, resources, even their grandma's silverware. Total war is basically when a country says, if we're going down, we're taking everyone with us. Psychological warfare. Sometimes you don't need to win the battle, you just need to convince your enemy that they've already lost. Psychological warfare is all about mind games, propaganda, and misinformation. In World War II, both sides dropped fake news leaflets and played spooky radio broadcasts to mess with enemy morale. Today, this has evolved into cyber disinformation campaigns, meme wars, and Twitter arguments. Who needs bombs when you can trick the other guy into surrendering? Cyber warfare. Welcome to the future of war, where instead of tanks, we have hackers with laptops crashing entire economies with a few keystrokes. Cyber warfare is all about hacking into enemy systems, stealing data, and shutting down power grids. Imagine a country waking up one day to find out all their banks are hacked, their internet is down, and their missiles have been accidentally launched into the ocean. Yep, cyber warfare is no joke, and it's already happening. Space warfare. Okay, we're not in full-on Star Wars mode yet, but space warfare is real. Countries are already developing anti-satellite weapons because knocking out your enemy's GPS and communication systems means suddenly their missiles don't know where to go. Right now, space warfare is mostly about controlling satellites, but give it a few decades and we might actually see laser battles in orbit. Biological and chemical warfare. If you thought bullets and bombs were scary, try invisible death floating through the air. Biological and chemical warfare is the evil genius version of war, where instead of shooting people, you just poison the air, water, or even spread deadly diseases. From mustard gas in World War I to fears of modern bioweapons, this is one of the most banned and terrifying forms of warfare. It's like if a James Bond villain was in charge of military strategy. Horrible idea, but technically effective. War on terror. And this isn't your typical war with battlefields and flags. It's a never-ending game of catch the bad guys on a global scale. The war on terror started after 9/11, and instead of fighting a single country, nations are fighting terrorist groups that operate across multiple borders. It's a mix of intelligence, military strikes, secret operations, and diplomacy. The tricky part? The enemy doesn't wear uniforms and they could be hiding anywhere. It's like playing hide and seek, but the stakes are way too high. Class warfare. Not all wars involve guns. Some involve paychecks, protests, and very angry people. Class warfare happens when the rich and powerful push things too far and the poor and working class decide they've had enough. The French Revolution, classic class war. The labor strikes of the early 1900s, also class war. It's basically when economic inequality boils over into full-blown revolution. If history has taught us anything, it's that if you ignore the poor for too long, they eventually grab the pitchforks. Economic warfare. Why send in an army when you can just crush your enemy's economy instead? Economic warfare is all about hitting where it hurts, the wallet. Countries use sanctions, trade restrictions, and financial blockades to cripple their enemies without firing a single shot. Want an example? The Cold War was a giant economic showdown where the US and allies basically outspent the Soviet Union until it collapsed. Imagine fighting a war with spreadsheets instead of soldiers. That's economic warfare.